Okay, good evening, everyone. Sorry that we're slightly late starting. We've just sorted out the text, so we're okay now. I'm Professor Gareth Stansfield, and I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor and Executive Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences here at the University. It is a real pleasure to welcome you all today. In the room, we have pupils and teachers from local schools and colleges with which the University has close relationships, alongside our current Exeter students, staff, and alumni, many of whom have joined online too. You are very welcome and thank you for joining us. Before introducing our guest speaker, please allow me to say a few words about our series on languages in a global world. The annual event was established in 2019 to showcase how languages can shape people's careers and relationships, give them a sense of adventure and a host of new ways of engaging with the world. Previous speakers have included Frank Gardner, the award-winning BBC security correspondent, Dame Melinda Simmons, the former UK ambassador to Ukraine and now the ambassador to Poland, and Rosie Tapper, Vision 2030 councillor for the British Embassy Riyadh, all of whom are Exeter graduates of languages. Our Languages in the Global World series is a public celebration of the richness of language learning with a serious underlying message. As global businesses, diplomatic corps, and leaders across a range of sectors have repeatedly confirmed, language education and the accompanying linguistic and intercultural competencies are a necessity for social, political, and economic development and for effective collaboration between peoples, countries. Languages offer power by enabling access to a much fuller range of conversations and their nuances. What's more, during global crises, governments, organizations, and researchers must be able to communicate and share accurate information, at which time language matters. Supporting today's event is the Department of Languages, Cultures and Visual Studies, which hosts our modern languages programs offering the study of Chinese, French, German, Italian, Russian, Spanish and Portuguese from beginner to degree level. Students study these in a broad and interconnected way through translation, linguistics, history, literature, film, art and visual culture, and current affairs. For students, staff and members of the public with less time but plenty of enthusiasm, the University's Language Centre offers in-person and online short courses from beginners to advanced level in several languages, from Cornish to Japanese, British Sign Language to Ukrainian. Turning now to this year's guest speaker, we are delighted to welcome back the Exeter alumnus Oliver Gadsby. Without saying too much, as the conversation to follow will explore Oliver's career and experience with languages in more depth. Oliver was with us in Exeter from 1980 to 1984, where he studied for his BA honours in French and German, before then embarking on a career in publishing. Now a multilingual leader in the publishing and information industries, Oliver was an editor in Germany, sales and marketing director in Sweden, CEO in several countries. He is president of the Independent Publishers Guild and director of the Stationers Company, one of the City of London's livery companies first established in 1403. I will shortly hand over to my colleagues, Professor Adam Watt, Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor for the faculty, and our Vice Chancellor for Global Engagement, Professor Lee. He will lead a conversation with Oliver, exploring the key role Oliver's languages degree has played in his career and his experience of the powerful skill set that comes with knowledge of a variety of languages. The conversation will be followed by a Q&A session hosted by Professor Fiona Cox, head of our Department for Languages, Cultures and Visual Studies, with questions pre-submitted by local school students being put to Oliver. My thanks again to all of you for attending this event, and now please join me in welcoming our guest, Oliver Gadsby, in conversation with Adam and Lee.
Thanks very much, Gareth. It's a huge pleasure to welcome you here, Oliver. And I know that it's must be quite an interesting moment to come back onto campus. Oliver, as you've heard, studied here in Exeter, studied modern languages with us, not just here, but in this very lecture theatre, in fact. So lots of memories, I'm sure, some of which we'll explore. My first question for you is about your motivation for studying languages. What made you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
Thank you. Yes, well, it's wonderful to be back, first of all. I did sit right in the middle there in 1980, a lecture in medieval French, and taking in what I could. So I was slightly afraid I might get an exam on medieval French coming back. But no. But languages, well, through my school years, for some reason, it was what I was good at, it was what I liked, it was what I spent my time on. I did a couple of exchange visits, one to Germany when I was about 14, had my first beer on that trip, and one to, we had family friends in Belgium I used to stay with, and they had a row of Tintin books and Asterix books in French, and I used to read those avidly with the French humor and play on words and so on. So I pursued it through school, enjoyed A levels in English, French, and German, narrow, but it was what I loved. And then looked at languages as the next step. I remember my mother saying, you know, just languages, shouldn't you do business studies and languages, or, you know, something more practical? And I thought, no, I want to do languages. I like them. And sure enough, as we will hear, they do lead on to practical things and business and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Wonderful. I can recognize that situation. I had a very similar conversation with my parents, and I ended up studying French and Spanish. But I had given them the sop of studying economics in sixth form as well, but
Yeah,
left that behind. Can you tell us a bit about your memories of studying here in Exeter? What it was like to be a languages student, and what changes you've noticed coming back?
Yes, well, it was, I remember when I came, I ended up choosing between Exeter and Durham. And when I went to Durham for interview, it was pouring with rain. And I stayed overnight and stayed in a college, and there was a dinner with Grace in Latin. And I thought, sure about this. And then I came down to Exeter, the sun was shining, and I thought, well, this is the place for me. And so it proved to be over those years. It was a much smaller university then. My memory is that it had 6,000 students, so there are now
About 30,000.
30,000. Okay, so it's grown from a smaller, more compact university to a much bigger one with all sorts of new activity, which is great to see. In those days, there were no computers for a start, so the library was the library with books in it. And when people were, I was one of the students listening in the lecture, nobody had a laptop that they were sitting with. It was all making notes and trying to keep up. But you know, the essence of the course, I mean, one of the reasons for choosing languages is that you get the year abroad, the third year abroad, and you return to the university in that fourth year. It's a slightly different experience. I really enjoyed my years. Then the course was, it was very much literature, and then it was translation in both directions into English from French and German in my case, and into those languages. And I always rather enjoyed and I still enjoy the kind of precision of trying to get the adjective agreements right and all that kind of stuff. There's a certain precision about language I like, as well as the business of communicating. And the year abroad gives you further opportunity to kind of explore that. I should also mention that this is the place where I met my wife. She was studying French and German. We were best friends through the course. We each had other partners. But after graduating, we got together, and nearly 40 years later, still going strong. She's come down this evening to have dinner with some old friends as well. And I'll mention her languages career, which continued in other interesting directions. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Study languages, find a partner. So you mentioned the year abroad, which I know is a big attraction for a lot of people. That's why languages can stand out, because it's not just about remaining in the UK. It's about exploring and using what you're learning in an authentic foreign setting. Can you tell us a bit about what you chose to do for your year abroad, and how formative it was?
Yeah. Well, it was the case then that you could either apply to be a languages assistant in a school, or you could go to a university and be a student. Is it still the case, or does that still happen?
It does still happen.
Yeah.
Work experience.
Work experience. Yeah. Anyway, I did say, actually, I'd like to work rather than just studying that year. And so I applied for a teaching post, and you just kind of said, yes, I'm interested. France, anywhere would be nice. And the reason I said France, I was doing joint honours French and German. By the way, can I just have a show of hands? Who here is studying, learning, or researching French? Okay. And German? Okay. Smaller group. Arabic? Okay. What about Spanish? Okay, so a good mix. Yeah. Anyway, I was doing joint honours French and German. So in theory, I should have done 6 months in each, but I claimed the card that I had already. I did a sort of gap year between school and university, in which I spent 1 term at an art school in Austria, studying calligraphy and book design in German. So I mean, that was a lovely experience in itself, being in the city of Linz and spending my days doing beautiful lettering and having the professor come and say, we need a bit more space here and you need, and so on. With that mixture of Hochdeutsch, High German, spoken in teaching environments and so on, but then the colloquial accent of Austria is very different, and I had to get to that. Anyway, so I felt I'd done some time, and I argued that I'd done some time with German. I should spend my in France, because I thought it would actually be more fun to have a job and spend the whole year over there, or the 10 months, whatever it is. So I applied for my teaching job and waited, and in those days you waited for the letter to come through the post, and it said, yes, you've been offered a teaching position in Villard-de-Lans. Please turn up on such and such a date. No internet, no nothing. Villard-de-Lans, where can that be? So I went down to the local library, I looked up Villard-de-Lans, and it said a ski resort in the Vercors near Grenoble. And I thought, that will do. So yeah, I got the train down there, I think, and turned up to be the English language assistant in a lycée, and it was called a lycée climatique, because it was up in the mountains, up high in the mountains, and it had a section of the school that was for elite skiers, and it had another section that was for children with breathing difficulties. There was this kind of strange mix of these kind of bronzed figures with all their ski suits on, and then others who were having had health challenges, and but the great thing, as far as I was concerned, was you could ski out of the door of the school, and I did. So I mean, I went out there not knowing how to ski, but very much enjoying that experience. And I learned to ski at 18, and I now have 3 sons who are keen skiers, and maybe there's a connection to the benefits of an Exeter education. Yes, but I mean, to elaborate on that, the actual teaching commitment, I remember, was about 12 hours. And one of the things with it being quite, it was up in a, this high village. It was partly a boarding, different groups that I talked about. So I got a room in the school. So I got a free room. I got paid. I had a teaching commitment of 12 hours a week. What's not to like, and plenty of skiing time. So it was great.
I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked many of my students over the years when they come back in their 4th year, having had the year abroad.
Yes.
Did you experience being in a classroom, being in a lecture differently, having then been a teacher?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yes, I think. I mean, it did, as we'll come on to, it did create for me an interest in teaching. I enjoyed the teaching. I enjoyed getting people talking and having fun with them, doing things of music and missing out various words in music and words, and just fun activities. No pressure on my part to get anyone through exams, but it did create that interest. And then yes, a critical eye of teaching and lecturing is certainly there, and I pursued some teaching later, and that that the interest in what enables people to learn languages, how you can help as a teacher, how you do it yourself as an individual, actually get it to go into your head. I think it's fascinating, and I'm still trying. So yeah.
Yeah. So working in languages, working between languages is often about negotiating cultural differences and negotiating the different ways in which one understands something vis-a-vis how it works in another language. And we've all heard the phrase "lost in translation."
Yes.
So my next question is to ask you, without any requirement for great revelation, have languages ever got you into or out of a tricky situation?
Ah, yeah. Well, I actually remember in that year when I was in the mountains. In those days, it was quite common to hitchhike, which means, for those who haven't experienced it, going to road along which you want to travel, standing there with the sign, perhaps saying where you want to go to, putting your thumb out, waiting for someone to pick you up. I used to do it up and down to Exeter when I was going home for Christmas. Even then, I would do a sign saying, well, the bit of London that I was going to get one lift out to the motorway junction, and then stand at the motorway sign saying London, and get picked up. And it was fascinating. In the UK, you might get picked up to show off their fast car, driver, all sorts of things. And I did it all over Europe, well, all over France, Germany, Italy, free way of traveling, and certainly a way of practicing your languages. There was one occasion I was going. A nice thing about the year abroad that you've got friends who are also dotted around France, Italy, whatever, and you can go and see them in your time off. So I would write my sign. In this case, I wrote a sign. Well, I must have written a series of signs, but anyway, one of them was Munich. I was going to go and visit one of my fellow students in Munich. So I was getting from the French Alps to Munich, and I got some of the way. I was still in France, can't quite remember where, but I came across by the side of the road, sort of awkwardly parked and whatever, this BMW with Munich plates on it. You could tell the German plates. You can tell which city they come from. And I stopped by it, and there were a couple trying to work out what was going on. And it turned out they were from Munich. They were on their way to Munich, and their car had been hit or some accident had occurred, which they needed to report to the police and get a mechanic involved and so on. And so I was talking to them in German, saying, "Funny enough, I'm on my way to Munich." And they said, "Well, we need to report this, and we don't speak any French. So, can you help?" So I said, "Well, let's go to the nearby police station." Again, no maps or anything. I don't know how I found it, but anyway. So we went to the police station and we're reporting this accident. They must have needed for insurance or something. And I was describing to the policeman what had happened, in French, talking to the German couple about it. At some point, the policeman gathered that I was neither French nor German, and he looked so irritated. And he said, "Oh, à quoi ça sert de parler 36 langues? What's the point of speaking 36 languages?" And I thought, well, so I can do exactly what I'm doing. But yeah, he thought that was just showing off. So, anyway, but then the Munich couple then said, "Well, we've got to wait 48 hours for the car piece to be delivered or something or other. Can we put you up in a hotel and then we'll take you?" So I ended up with 2 nights in a hotel at their expense, a lovely ride to Munich. And, so that was one nice example. And then actually, when I was a student, after the year abroad, I think I met someone, and it led to me applying for a job as a tour guide, taking groups of Americans around Europe. So in the summer after the 3rd year, and then in the summer after graduation, I took parties of teenagers and American teachers around. I mean, we did these extraordinary trips where I would meet them in London, do a London thing, and then coach across to Paris, And I remember one occasion where there were no mobile phones then. So I had my kind of written instructions, get to such and such a hotel, we've got 50 rooms booked, we're booked in at the restaurant next door, and you know, that'll all be fine. And we get to the hotel late because there's all sorts of traffic jams. I remember the coach decided at one point to go the wrong way around because he was fed up with the traffic. But we got to the hotel and there was a note, there was a whatever it was, not even it'd been a fax. There was a message from the company that ran these things saying the restaurant has changed. Please take them on the metro across to so-and-so restaurant in another part of town. So I've got 50 Americans who are tired and teenagers and you know, none of them had ever been outside America. And fairly soon after rush hour, I've got to get them across the metro and it was, yes, the only way you can do it is by shouting very in English in that case, but also sorting things out with restaurants. And we went down to Switzerland by overnight train, and we went up to Berlin. And I remember taking them through Checkpoint Charlie, which some of you will know was the divided Germany in those days. And we went through when it was still active and into East Germany. So I was using my German along the way and so on. So yeah, it gave me it was one of the best paid because they used to unload all the cash they got at the end, not knowing what it was. But most demanding jobs I've had. Yeah.
That sounds like quite an adventure. So we've heard about French and German. I believe you do speak other languages too. Can you tell us a bit about that spread of languages and what you think the secret might be to learning them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, early at school, I had a little go at Russian. I thought at some point I'd do an O-level GCSE in Russian. I didn't get to that far because he was very well-meaning, but the approach of an elderly maths teacher, was to come in and write up on the board a table of declensions of all these grammatical forms. And then he just stood back and said, "Learn this." That was not the way to learn languages, I found. So the memory for the Russian alphabet is stuck in my mind, but that's about it. But so French and German, obviously here and beyond. And then later in my career in publishing, to my surprise, I was asked to go to Sweden and moved then with my wife and 3 little boys, 5, 3, and 1, to Stockholm. And although in Sweden, you know, everyone you meet, everyone you're working with speaks very good English. I was interested and motivated to learn Swedish. I thought it was a bit ridiculous in a company of 600 people if every time I was in the room they had to speak English. So jag lärde mig svenska, and that was a pleasure. And if you speak English and German, you've got a pretty good starting point for Swedish. But there are complications of the grammar is fairly simple in Swedish because the verb is the same for every person. Jag gör, du gör, han gör, vi gör, de gör. But there are some consonants which are unfamiliar. There's a th and a th, which are different, critically different. So a nurse, for instance, is a sköterska, and you've got to get those. So I learned Swedish, yeah, and I learned it so that I could operate in it, you know, for all my working time there. Well, I did some lessons before going there, and then when I got there, I said, "Look, I want to learn Swedish. You speak Swedish, I'll speak English," and I did that for 3 months, and had some more lessons, and then I switched to working in Swedish, and yeah, so that was fun. And then I've been plugging away at Italian. I've had few goes at Italian. Anybody here do Duolingo? Yeah, a few hands. It's worth a go, actually. It does not replace a proper course, a proper education. It certainly doesn't replace being there and learning it. But it's pretty good and it's free. I've been plugging away at Duolingo Italian, and I've got a pathetic boast, which is that today is say 1900, 1900 in my Italian street. So I can say the woman has an apple very fluently. No, that's good. So Italian, I'd like to get better at, and I need to go and do a proper. I think should do a degree in Italian. Maybe that'd be nice. And then, as we'll perhaps come on to, I spent some time in Morocco, and then I had a little taste of Arabic. I learned a few words of Berber. You know, so I love that business of unfamiliarity followed by that's how it works, and yeah, it's starting to crack a language. It's great. Yeah.
And once you have a bit of confidence in the language, it breeds that inquisitiveness that pushes you on with others. Yeah.
And you start to see patterns more quickly. I
think.
Yeah. But you know, there are still challenges, and I have to say it gets slightly more difficult as you get older. Is my experience. Yeah, start early. Good to see this group in early learning mode. Yeah.
The other secret is perhaps in the main curiosity, right? So
Yeah.
curious about language.
Yes, I think so.
To explore, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really lovely to hear those interesting stories. But we want to explore more about your career.
Sure.
So after university,
Mm-hmm.
how did you navigate your very first career steps as a recent graduate? What did you do?
Well, at the time, I didn't really want a proper job, but I did want to travel. No, this is unfair on the job that I had done. I wanted to travel, and I thought, well, I'll do a course in teaching English as a foreign language. So I did a 4-week course at International House in London, which still exists. I looked it up yesterday. 4-week course. It's now called a CELTA course, CELTA. And it is 4 weeks of intensive, you know, that thing of how do you actually teach, what do you do when you stand up, how do you get people interacting? You know, short but effective, and it equips you. And in those days, I don't know if it's still the case, but if you got an A or a B on their course, they would guarantee you a job somewhere in the world on their course. So I did all right, and I remember they offered Japan, Turkey, or Morocco. What would you choose? In those days, I think travel was a bit more, relatively more expensive and different. Morocco was kind of close enough, but different enough as well. So anyway, I chose to go to Casablanca in Morocco to teach English for a year. And again, no internet, down to the local library again, Casablanca. Right? And it's people have romantic associations because the famous film with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. But it's actually a big industrial port city on the west of the Mediterranean, north on the Atlantic coast. But it's got an old town of, you know, Moroccan souk, and it's got all the interest of Morocco, which was you know, there are all sorts of history, including the Arab inflow in the 8th century. So there's an Arabic layer, there's the original Berber population, especially in the mountains. Then much later, fast forward, it was a French and Spanish protectorate, i.e. colony, effectively. So you've got all these layers. So French was quite useful there, but you know, the dominant language is Arabic, and so I started to tune in. But yeah,
that's how you started.
Yeah, so
Arabic.
I taught English there for a year, while my wife did a postgrad in translating and interpreting in Bradford, and that had consequences of further move. But yeah, so that was the start.
Yeah, brilliant. So there's a lot of talk in higher education these days about skills and employability. So how do you think the training you had in Exeter prepared you for the world of work?
Well, I think, I mean, it certainly opened doors for me. From Morocco, my wife then got a job in Germany, wrote me a letter in those days saying, I've got a job in Germany. So I wrote back saying, can I come too? And we did, and then we got married while in Germany. But we still have the letters. Anyway, so we went out there. I didn't have a job. She had a job. I found our first flat. and then I looked for a job, and I thought about. I decided I didn't want to necessarily carry on teaching, but publishing and educational publishing was interesting. And I found there was a large educational publisher, there still is, in Stuttgart, called Klett Verlag, and they happened to be looking for an English language editor at that moment. So it was perfect, and I joined them as an editor of school books. So books for German school kids learning English and French. So again, it was this lovely combination of things. But on a more general level, I think it gives you an inquiring mind, an ability to put yourself in other people's shoes. There was actually a brilliant article, perfectly timed, in the Guardian on Saturday, saying why it is still important to learn languages in the age of AI translation tools. And I think that's absolutely the case. So I was able to immerse myself in Germany and work for years in Germany. So I learned my publishing vocabulary in German. And then we decided to come back to the UK. And I got a job as a commissioning editor in the UK. So I was kind of, a couple of rungs up. The only trouble was I didn't know any of the words in the proofs and the type corrections and so on. So I had to quickly learn those. Yeah, I think that business of being able to see things through other people's eyes, put yourself in other people's shoes, know that UK media and is not what the world is about, and I really enjoyed the literary side of the course, and I think reading attentively and being attentive to language and thinking about language is really helpful. I admit I don't read very many books in French, German, or Swedish these days, although I do every now and then. But I do still, now, of course, with the internet, you can read the media, you can listen to the radio, you can do all these things. So I do consume quite a lot of news. I always think, if there's a endless debate in the French Parliament about the budget, I'd rather, hear what they're saying in France about that, get the BBC's version or any other version, and so it goes on. So I think it's a good thing, and all sorts of careers can come out of this. And in fact, I must just mention my friend Mary Hartley, who graduated here in 2019 in French, Spanish, and Portugal, has recently started a website called whatnextwithlanguages.co.uk, and she's got profiles on there. She only started this a couple of weeks ago, but there are profiles of people who did languages and where it's taken them. It's a financial senior account manager. There's a manager in sustainable supply chain consulting. There's a human rights lawyer. Languages are by no means limited. They take you in all kinds of interesting directions. So do have a look at what whatnextwithlanguages.co.uk.
Yeah, just you talk about your legal. So of course you probably know what I'm gonna talk about next is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So it's so popular these days, and people start to question the value of learning language. So in your view, how do we as linguists work with AI in the future? And is it a threat? Is it an opportunity? What is it?
Yeah, well, I think it's a tool that can be useful. I must admit, I was recently I was arranging a wedding actually for my youngest son in France, helping him to arrange it, but he doesn't speak French. And some of the business emails about, can we do this or can we get this? Frankly, ChatGPT can come up with the French more quickly than I can be bothered to do for that. But I will always check it and so on. But if a lot of life, certainly a lot of working life is about persuading people, I think, that something is interesting or something is worth doing or something is worth following or whatever. That's been my experience in publishing and in leading companies and so on. You're persuading people, and AI doesn't do that for you. You might use it in the background to prepare a few things, but and this whole social side of life and of work, working in Germany with my colleagues, working in Sweden, in the evenings, they don't want to they don't want to speak English, they want to chat in their own language, and AI can help in that. Let's hope so. So I think, you know, use it. It's a big debate in the publishing industry at the moment because people are feeling that these AI companies have, you know, arguably ripped off a lot of content to train them on, haven't they? Copyright and so on. So there are all sorts of debates about that. But you know, it's an interesting new thing, but it doesn't take away the need to communicate, to persuade, to engage, and to have fun as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Language is a social power as well.
Absolutely.
Social capital. So we need to know the value of learning language is not just to transactional value.
No,
that's
right.
So,
yeah.
So yes, you have worked in publishing for a long time in
Yes.
different settings. So perhaps you could give some advice to the people who sit there in the audience and might be interested in going to this sector or interested in this sector.
Yeah. Well, I've found it great, and it continues to be an enjoyable world to work in. So I started with school books, and that business said, well, how do you make it interesting for the people who are, for the students, the pupils who are going to be learning a language? You know, when do you need the listening exercise, and when do you need some video, and when do you need things like that? And I've gone on to all sorts of other publishing, but mainly book publishing rather than journals. So I've published in my time thousands of books of all kinds, and it's a nice mix of people skills, you know, working with authors in shaping an idea. They've got an idea and you can help them present it, or you can say, well, that would fit in our series that does such and such. And then there's the whole technology side of it. When I started, cut and paste meant cut and paste with glue. But we've gone through, you know, generations of ebooks and so on. And publishing has thrived through all of that. Actually, every now and then it thinks the world is about to end and ebooks will end everything. Turns out they don't at all. Like, people still want to read. So that's been good. So there's the people side, the technology side, and just the business side of, you know, how do you actually create something that makes enough money to pay for the next thing. I've run companies and turned companies around that were losing money, and that business of shaping a team is lovely. So there are all kinds of publishing: school books, academic books, blockbuster novels, romance novels, you know, all kinds of different types of publishing. It's also, it's naturally global, which is rather nice. I've been to the Frankfurt Book Fair almost every year for the last God knows how long. And there are also all sorts of jobs in it. People think about publishing, they think of being an editor of fiction or whatever. There are very few jobs being an editor in fiction. I, for one, would be hopeless in that role. But there are lots of jobs in marketing, in data, in sales, in foreign rights, which needs language skills. It's a really interesting world. It continues to thrive. It's all worried about AI at the moment, but it's a nice world. I encourage anyone to have a look. And I'm president of the Independent Publishers Guild. Look that up online. It's a jobs page, and there are things about the kinds of jobs that are in that industry. Yeah.
Thank you. Out of the thousands projects, are there particular ones you're especially proud of? I'm sure there are, but just quickly give us.
Yeah. Well, in when I was commissioning editor for modern languages at Hodder and Stoughton, so this is after Germany, I came back to the UK as commissioning editor, and my job was to create new course materials in languages. And some of them have long since faded away, but there's one that I commissioned actually in Spanish, a course called Pasos, which I commissioned in 1991, and it's a course for adults. And I went into Waterstones on Trafalgar Square a couple of days ago. And there it is.
Hey.
The publisher's pride and things that you had a hand in. So that was nice, and that you know, here we are all those years later. Can't even do the maths. That was good to see. I had, in a later job, I was responsible for strategy and various things, including online learning at Informa, which is the group that owns Taylor & Francis and Routledge. And I was very interested in online learning, and I set up a partnership with St Andrews University in terrorism studies. And they are authors of books and journals in terrorism studies. A real centre of expertise still is. But there was a demand for professional courses for people in security, police, military, and so on, to know more about these terrorist movements and so on. And with the professor, I helped shape an online course. So that was a slightly different thing. And that I think it just stopped after about 20 years. And then my last publishing project, ending in 2024, was a revised edition of the complete psychological works of Sigmund Freud in 24 volumes, and I have them on my shelf. And this was, obviously, Freud wrote in German, bad translation in the 1920s. There was a good translation in the 1950s, published in the 1960s. But here we are in 2020s. That world felt that a new edition was needed. And Professor Mark Solms in South Africa spent 30 years working on a new edition. And it's a wonderful work. And it's, I was looking last night, sorry, how are we doing our time? Anyway, there are 60 pages and notes on the translation decisions in volume 24. How do you translate the word "teep"? It was translated as "instinct" in the 60s edition, and he decided to change it to "drive," and there are 1,000 copies, which is correct. So that world of translation. Yes, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm sure we can, continue the conversation, but we know that we've got some really interesting questions from students. So now we're going to hand over to my colleague, Fiona. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Perfect. So as well as echoing Adam and Lee in their welcome to Oliver and comments on what a wonderful privilege and honour it is to have you with us today, I also wanted to say that it's an absolute delight to welcome pupils from schools and to see the interest in languages burgeoning and alive and well with all of you. So warmest thanks and a big welcome to all of you joining us here in Exeter or indeed online. And thank you for the fantastic questions that you've sent in, which I'll convey to you without further ado.
Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to it.
So we will start with, can you talk us through one of the most challenging or exciting things that you have had to face in terms of languages, abroad, living abroad on your year abroad, or indeed here in the UK, which is a really valuable point because it's a reminder that you could be in a multilingual environment here.
Yes, yeah.
Without having to go abroad.
Well, thank you, Fiona. Yes, yes, all sorts of adventures abroad, and mountains all seem to feature. I remember when I was in Morocco, I spent I had a colleague who was a good mountaineer. I was a sort of good follower of mountaineers, and we spent one Christmas high up in the mountains, staying in a mountain hut where we wanted to keep climbing, so we carried on slightly longer than our rations allowed. So Christmas lunch was a shared tin of sardines, I remember, for the thing. Anyway, that's not so. Working in these different languages was a real privilege and great fun. But I've kept that interest in languages and also that interest in teaching English as a foreign language. And I now, in my hometown of Cheltenham, I'm involved, and I'm a trustee of a charity called Cheltenham Welcomes Refugees. And we have groups of people who've come here seeking refuge and seeking asylum and getting their refugee status established. And one of the things that we want to do is help them integrate, help them become part of society, help enjoy living in Cheltenham. So we do a Monday morning social group, and we do silly games and throwing balls around and learning each other's names and we have someone from the theatre who gets us doing silly mimes and all kinds of things. But anyway, I then say to anybody who's been there, if you want to stay on for an hour, we'll do some English. So I have people from Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Syria, Afghanistan, El Salvador, Russia. Never know quite who's going to come. Language level of great variation, but it's lovely to. It's very interesting to see the language skills that they come with. Some of them are very unconfident about their English, and then you say, well, you know, what languages do you speak? Oh, well, I speak this and that. And, you know, reel off 4 languages that they speak as kind of a matter of course and don't matter at all. So I love hearing their stories, and obviously helping them with their English is a great thing, and seeing them get settled and get into, you know, a new pattern of life in the UK, which is lovely to see.
That sounds fascinating, and not least because then you're seeing the UK through different eyes as well.
That's true, yes.
Perhaps leads on to the next question. It's a really good question. Has learning languages changed your relationship with your mother tongue?
That is a good question. I think, well, actually, one thing is that with my wife being a linguist as well, we pepper our, very slightly less so, but we've always used some words in French and German amongst what we talk, particularly where there isn't an English word for something. So, for instance, in English, if someone says they're not coming tomorrow, in order to contradict them, you have to say yes, they are, or you know, the window isn't open. Yes, it is, and so on. In German, you can just say doch, and so, or in French, si, but somehow doch sounds rather more emphatic. And so we've always peppered, and certainly back in the day, our letters to and from Morocco were sort of trilingual letters. They'd be impenetrable to most people, but yeah, the other thing I think is a certain love of precision. So when my sons say, Jack and me are going to, I think, you can't say that. And there's something about, particularly in German, Jack und ich werden da da da, not Jack und mich, you know, that would be ridiculous. So I think, yeah, just a certain consciousness of language and enjoyment of those where they come from.
I'm feeling the solidarity.
Yes.
I have the same conversations with my sons who say, no one else cares. You're the only person in the world who cares.
Well, there we are.
So thank you.
Yeah.
What languages do you think in, and do you have sort of certain activities that demand different languages?
Yeah, well, so, yeah, that's the question. What you thinking is, these are extremely good questions, by the way.
They are.
What you thinking? I mean, I think certainly now the reality is I think in English. When I was working in Germany, when I was working in Sweden, or when I'm in France now, I'm not mentally translating. I'm just producing and communicating. So there isn't a translation process involved, although there's sometimes a search around a problem where you can't think of the way of saying it, so you have to describe what you're saying in a slightly different way, but not back to that. Those are the words in English, therefore I'll do that. I grew up with an aunt who was trilingual. She'd grown up with a family that had lived in England, Russia, and France, and she was completely trilingual. She said what mattered was the language you count in. Actually, in your head, if you're counting things, what language do you count in, and you tend to go back to your mother tongue, as it was called. Yeah, I think yeah, that's probably my answer to those things. I'm trying to think of the activities that I would do. Yeah, anyway, certainly reading me
or dreaming. So if
Dreaming,
you dream about your year report,
yes,
you dream in German,
dream entirely in Arabic. No one can check or do my
indeed. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What would you say is easy about learning? Maybe there isn't anything that's easy about learning languages, but is there anything easy about learning languages? And would you have top tips for how to go about language learning?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy, but it's very satisfying, isn't it? Of course, you know, one sees children who grow up with 2 or 3 languages, and I suppose it is easy, isn't it? They just absorb them. But for those of us who come to it later, there is a process to go through. I think I remember being in Morocco and being surrounded by Arabic speakers on the buses and so on. And at the beginning, it's just a babble of sound, and then you start to hear repetitions, and you start hearing where people say thank you, and it's clear that it's thank you. So I think listening for patterns and listening for words that are repeated, and I think so. I've always found a real pleasure in listening and also speaking. And I suppose, you know, there's the vanity of trying to pretend that you're going to sound like a native speaker, and the lovely occasions when you get mistaken for a native speaker, which happen to be more in Germany than France, I must admit. But you know, it is very satisfying. And I think in terms of how to do it, you know, Duolingo by all means. I think a variety is great. You know, so do read, now you've got everything available online. Listen to it, find a podcast that you like. There's a podcast with Simple Italian that I've been, you know, sometimes adding to the Duolingo mix, you know, talking about the news in Italian. Read, and as I say, I still actually, when I'm in France, I still pick up a Tintin book or an Australian book. So, bande dessinée, you know, cartoons and jokes and so on. Do a mix, and of course, if you can, go and live there and work there. There is something about working in a foreign language that takes you another step, I think. Yeah.
We'll have one more question before I come to Lee again, and it brings us, in a sense, it brings us full circle. So, you studied French and German here.
Yeah.
If you had your time again, would those be the languages you chose, or would you choose different languages now?
Well, now that's a question. You know, I think I'd do it again, but I now, through my experience of working with refugees and people seeking asylum, Arabic or Farsi would be very useful. So maybe I should get out of the European sphere and add a further and perhaps more challenging language. But yeah, it's been a lovely journey. You continue to learn, and as I say, languages are great for career, for life, for seeing things through other people's eyes, and for enjoying a range of cultures.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Great. Yeah, the hour has passed so quickly, and from the reaction, I can see we have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with Oliver, but also we have enjoyed your experiences and insights into various topics. So I'm sure the conversation can carry on when we move to the Queen's Cafe later on. But I just want to take this opportunity to thank Oliver for sharing your experience and for giving up your time to us. And so, yeah, so thank you very much. And so delighted to have you back to Exeter, but also Queen's Building and this very room. I also want to take this opportunity to give you a little gift from the faculty. We have sampled some of our small gifts for you, so thank you very much.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. Well, look at that. So, a tote bag, if nothing else. Yes, the context will be rather splendid. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been real pleasure.
As I said, so the conversation can